When my own daughter publicly called me a pathetic old man at her company's charity gala, she had no idea I owned 40% of her firm. What happened next would change both our lives forever. My name is Vincent Blackwood, and at 70 years old, I've witnessed more corporate battles than most people see in their lifetimes. From my modest beginnings in the industrial district of Millbrook City to becoming one of the most influential silent investors on the East Coast, I've learned that true power often lies in what remains unseen. But nothing prepared me for the war that was about to unfold between me and my own flesh and blood. My daughter, Isabella Blackwood-Sterling, had always possessed an razor-sharp intellect that could cut through the most complex business negotiations. At 32, she stood as the youngest senior partner at Meridian Strategic Solutions, one of Portland's most prestigious consulting firms. Her corner office on the 45th floor of the Crystalview Tower overlooked the Columbia River, and her client roster read like a who's who of Fortune 500 companies. What Isabella didn't know, what she had never even suspected, was that the mysterious VB Holdings that had provided the crucial $15 million investment allowing Meridian Strategic Solutions to expand into international markets 3 years ago wasn't some faceless corporate entity. It was me, her father, the man she had systematically dismissed, belittled, and pushed out of her life over the past decade. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Growing up, Isabella had been Daddy's little girl. I remember teaching her chess on rainy Sunday afternoons in our Riverside Heights home, watching her analytical mind dissect each move with the precision of a surgeon. She had inherited my strategic thinking, but somewhere along the way she had also inherited something else, a coldness that I recognized all too well from my own ruthless business dealings. The shift began during her senior year at Whitmore Academy, the elite preparatory school where I had enrolled her to ensure she received the finest education money could buy. Isabella had discovered that several of her classmates' parents were clients of mine, and somehow, in her teenage mind, this became a source of embarrassment rather than pride. "Dad, you're just a money guy," she had said one evening over dinner, her voice dripping with the casual cruelty that only a 17-year-old could muster. "You don't actually create anything. You just move numbers around and take credit for other people's work." I had tried to explain the intricacies of venture capital, how identifying promising startups and providing them with the resources to grow was its own form of creation, but Isabella had already made up her mind. In her worldview, I was nothing more than a parasitic middleman, profiting off the genuine innovations of others. The distance only grew during her years at Pemberton University, where she double-majored in business administration and international relations. She had insisted on paying her own way through a combination of academic scholarships, part-time work, and student loans, anything to avoid being bought by what she called my dirty money. I had respected her independence, even admired it, but I had also quietly ensured that certain opportunities came her way. A summer internship at Goldman Sachs didn't just happen because of her grades, though her 4.0 GPA certainly didn't hurt. The recommendation letter from Professor Hamilton that secured her spot at Harvard Business School had been influenced by a generous donation to the university's new economics building, though Isabella never knew about the Blackwood Innovation Center's naming rights. After earning her MBA with distinction, Isabella had joined a small consulting firm in Boston called Strategic Horizons. I had watched from afar as she worked 18-hour days, building client relationships and developing innovative solutions for struggling companies. Her natural talent was undeniable, but I also knew the firm was on shaky financial ground. When Strategic Horizons went bankrupt 6 months later, Isabella found herself unemployed in a competitive market. That's when Meridian Strategic Solutions in Portland had reached out with an offer, a senior consultant position with a clear path to partnership. What Isabella saw as recognition of her abilities was actually the result of a carefully orchestrated series of phone calls and meetings that I had initiated through intermediaries. The managing partner of Meridian, Jonathan Winters, was an old acquaintance who had needed capital for expansion. My investment through VB Holdings had come with certain conditions, not least of which was that they actively recruit a specific Harvard Business School graduate who specialized in corporate restructuring. Over the next 3 years, Isabella had thrived at Meridian. Her division's revenue had increased by 340%, and she had successfully led the turnaround of 7 failing companies. Each success had been earned through her own intelligence and work ethic, but each opportunity had been made possible by the foundation I had quietly provided. The irony was exquisite and painful in equal measure. The more successful Isabella became, the more disdainful she grew towards me. During our increasingly rare phone conversations, she would regale me with stories of her latest triumphs, always followed by subtle digs about how she had achieved everything through her own merit, unlike certain people who had simply inherited their wealth. If only she knew that her grandfather, Thomas Blackwood, had died penniless in a factory accident when I was 12 years old, and that every dollar I possessed had been earned through decades of calculated risks and strategic investments. The final straw in our relationship had come 2 years ago during Thanksgiving dinner. Isabella had brought her then-boyfriend, Marcus Sterling, a hedge fund manager who possessed all the charm and depth of a sales brochure. Throughout the meal, Marcus had peppered me with condescending questions about my little investment hobby, while Isabella had sat silently, occasionally smirking at his more pointed barbs. When I had politely mentioned that I was considering expanding into the renewable energy sector, Marcus had laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Vincent, leave the real investing to those of us who understand modern markets. Your generation's approach to venture capital is about as relevant as a telegraph in the smartphone age." Isabella had not only failed to defend me, she had nodded in agreement. Dad's always been a bit behind the times when it comes to understanding innovative business models, she had said, her voice carrying the casual dismissiveness of someone discussing an outdated appliance. That night, after they had left, I had sat in my study surrounded by awards from 3 decades of successful investments, including the Innovator of the Year recognition from the National Venture Capital Association, and made a decision. If Isabella wanted to succeed without any connection to me, I would give her exactly what she wanted, complete independence even from the knowledge of how her success had been facilitated. I had instructed my lawyers to restructure VB Holdings, creating multiple shell companies and investment vehicles that would make it nearly impossible for anyone to trace the ownership back to Vincent Blackwood. Isabella would continue to work for a company I partially owned, continue to benefit from opportunities I created, but she would do so in complete ignorance of the irony. The arrangement had worked flawlessly until 3 weeks ago when Meridian Strategic Solutions announced their annual charity gala, an evening for tomorrow's leaders, designed to raise funds for STEM education programs in underserved communities. As a major investor in the firm, VB Holdings had automatically received an invitation to send a representative. As Vincent Blackwood, private citizen, and Isabella's estranged father, I had received nothing. The decision to attend had been spontaneous. I had been reviewing Meridian's quarterly reports when I noticed that Isabella was scheduled to deliver the keynote address about building success through personal integrity and independent achievement. The title alone had sparked a mixture of pride and frustration that I couldn't quite shake. I wanted to see her in her element, commanding a room full of Portland's business elite. I wanted to witness the success that she had built, even if she didn't realize I had helped lay the foundation.
Most of all, I wanted to understand when exactly the brilliant, curious little girl who had once asked me to explain the difference between stocks and bonds had transformed into the cold, dismissive woman who couldn't spare an hour for lunch with her own father. The Riverside Grand Hotel, where the gala was being held, stood as a testament to Portland's evolution from industrial port city to cultural metropolis. Its Art Deco facade had been restored to its 1920s grandeur, while the interior had been modernized with sustainable materials and cutting-edge technology. The main ballroom where Meridian's event was taking place could accommodate 400 guests beneath crystal chandeliers that once graced the ballrooms of European palaces. I had chosen my attire carefully, a classic black tuxedo from Savile Row, paired with understated cuff lengths that had belonged to my mentor, Harold Pemberton, the man who gave me my first real opportunity in the investment world 45 years ago. I wanted to look dignified but not ostentatious, successful but not flashy. I was, after all, attending as both an investor evaluating his portfolio and a father hoping to reconnect with his daughter. The irony of needing to evaluate my own investment while trying to repair my relationship with the woman who ran it was not lost on me. As my driver pulled up to the hotel's valet stand, I could see the gathered crowd through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Portland's business community had turned out in force, their jewels and formal wear glittering under the lobby's ambient lighting. These were the people who shaped the city's economic future, the decision-makers who determined which startups would receive funding and which established companies would receive the strategic guidance that they needed to thrive. And somewhere in that crowd was Isabella, probably holding court near the silent auction tables, discussing market trends and corporate strategy with the same passionate intensity she had once reserved for explaining why her chess moves were superior to mine. I had no idea that within the next 4 hours, that passionate intensity would be directed at destroying me in front of everyone who mattered in our professional circles. I had no idea that the foundation I had built to support her success was about to become the very weapon she would use to try and demolish my reputation. Most importantly, I had no idea that by the end of the evening, Isabella would learn exactly who had been pulling the strings behind her meteoric rise, and that the revelation would change both of our lives in ways that neither of us could have imagined. As I stepped out of the car and straightened my bow tie, I thought I was simply a father trying to bridge the gap with his estranged daughter. I was actually walking into the most consequential night of both of our lives.
The Riverside Grand Hotel's ballroom buzzed with the sophisticated energy of Portland's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white orchids, while a string quartet played softly near the silent auction displays. I recognized several faces from business magazines and financial journals, tech entrepreneurs, real estate moguls, and venture capitalists who had shaped the Pacific Northwest's economic landscape. And there, commanding attention at the center of it all, was Isabella. She looked stunning in a midnight blue evening gown that complemented her dark hair, which was pulled back in an elegant chignon. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged, shaking hands with city officials, laughing at the right moments, and effortlessly transitioning between conversations about market volatility and charity initiatives. For a moment, watching her in her element, I felt nothing but pride. This brilliant, accomplished woman was my daughter. Whatever our personal differences, she had built something remarkable. I approached the registration table, where a young woman with a tablet was checking in guests. "Good evening," I said, offering my most charming smile. "Vincent Blackwood." She scrolled through her list, frowning slightly.
I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood, but I don't see your name on the guest list. Are you perhaps registered under a company game? Try VB Holdings, I suggested. Her face brightened immediately. Of course! Mr. Blackwood, it's an honor to have you here. Miss Blackwood-Sterling specifically mentioned that VB Holdings would be represented tonight. She's very grateful for your company's continued support of Meridian Strategic Solutions. The irony was delicious. Isabella had personally hoped that her father's investment company would attend, never realizing she was hoping for her father himself. I'm sure she is, I replied, accepting my name tag, which simply read VB Holdings, and a program for the evening's events. As I entered the main ballroom, I spotted Jonathan Winters, Meridian's managing partner, near the bar. Jonathan was a good man, Harvard-educated, with a reputation for ethical business practices and genuine concern for his employees' well-being. Our relationship had always been cordial, though he knew me only as the mysterious investor behind VB Holdings, never suspecting the family connection. "Vincent," Jonathan approached with a warm smile and firm handshake. "I'm delighted you could make it. Isabella will be thrilled to know that VB Holdings is represented tonight." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. "How has business been?" "Exceptional, thanks largely to your investment. Isabella's division alone has exceeded projections by 200% this quarter. That woman is a force of nature." His admiration was genuine, and it warmed my heart to hear my daughter praised by someone of Jonathan's caliber. "She certainly seems to command respect," I observed, watching Isabella as she engaged with a group of potential clients across the room. "More than respect, she inspires genuine loyalty. Just last month, she convinced 3 major corporations to restructure their operations instead of declaring bankruptcy, saved over 2,000 jobs. She's not just brilliant, she has integrity. Rare combination in our business." As Jonathan excused himself to welcome other guests, I found myself studying Isabella more closely. She was in her element, but I began to notice subtle details that revealed a different story. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when greeting certain colleagues, the defensive posture she adopted when discussing her background with new acquaintances, the careful way she avoided mentioning her family, deflecting personal questions with professional accomplishments. She was successful, but she was also isolated, and I realized with growing sadness that much of that isolation was connected to her relationship with me, or rather, her lack of one. The cocktail hour continued smoothly until I decided to approach the silent auction tables. The items were impressive: a week in a Tuscan villa, courtside seats to the Portland Trail Blazers, a private wine tasting with a renowned sommelier, but it was the auction sheet for an exclusive strategy session with Isabella Blackwood-Sterling that caught my attention. The bidding was already at $15,000, with several prominent business leaders vying for an hour of my daughter's expertise. I picked up the pen and added my bid, $25,000, signed simply, VB. "That's quite a generous bid." I turned to find Isabella herself standing beside me, having approached while I was writing. Up close, she was even more striking. Her mother's green eyes combined with the determined jawline that mirrored my own. "It's for a worthy cause," I replied carefully, "and from what I've heard, Ms. Blackwood-Sterling's strategic insights are worth every penny."
Isabella's smile was polite but distant, the same expression she might use with any potential client. I appreciate VB Holdings' support of Meridian. Your investment has been crucial to our expansion. I'm sure the company is in excellent hands, I said, studying her face for any sign of recognition. There was none. To her, I was simply another investor in a crowd of business contacts. Tell me, Isabella continued, her voice taking on the subtle probing tone I recognized from her childhood interrogations. What drew VB Holdings to invest in Meridian specifically? There were certainly other consulting firms looking for capital. This was dangerous territory. I needed to be careful not to reveal too much while satisfying her curiosity. Jonathan Winters impressed me with his vision for the company's future, and I was particularly intrigued by the potential of your corporate restructuring division.
My division? Her eyebrows rose slightly. That's specific. Most investors focus on overall market positioning rather than individual departments. I believe in backing exceptional talent, I replied. Your track record speaks for itself. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, surprise, perhaps even pleasure at the recognition, but it was quickly replaced by her professional mask. Well, I hope our performance continues to justify your confidence, she said. If you'll excuse me, I should prepare for my keynote address. As she walked away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride at her professionalism and success, sadness at the gulf between us, and a growing unease about what would happen when she inevitably discovered the truth about VB Holdings. I didn't have long to wait. The dinner portion of the evening proceeded flawlessly. I found myself seated at a table with other investors and business leaders, engaging in the kind of strategic discussions that had once energized me. But my attention kept drifting to the head table, where Isabella sat between Jonathan Winters and the mayor of Portland. When the time came for her keynote address, Isabella rose gracefully and approached the podium. The room fell silent, all eyes focused on this young woman who had become one of Portland's most respected business leaders. "Good evening," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. "When I was asked to speak tonight about building success through personal integrity and independent achievement, I thought about the journey that brought me to this podium." Her speech was masterful, personal enough to be engaging, professional enough to maintain credibility, inspiring enough to motivate action. She spoke about overcoming obstacles, about the importance of earning success rather than inheriting it, about the satisfaction that comes from knowing your achievements are entirely your own. With each word, the knife twisted deeper into my heart. Too often in our society, we see individuals who mistake privilege for merit, who confuse inherited advantages with personal accomplishment. True success, lasting success, comes from within. It comes from refusing to rely on handouts, from building something meaningful through your own intelligence, your own work ethic, your own integrity. The audience was captivated. Several people at my table nodded approvingly. And all I could think about was the irony. My daughter was delivering a speech about independence while standing in a company I had helped fund, speaking to an audience that included the very man who had made her success possible. But the real moment of truth was yet to come. As Isabella concluded her remarks to enthusiastic applause, Jonathan Winters took the podium for the evening's final presentation, recognizing major donors and investors who had made Meridian's success possible. Before we conclude tonight's festivities, I want to take a moment to recognize the individuals and organizations whose vision and support have transformed Meridian Strategic Solutions into one of the Pacific Northwest's premier consulting firms. He began with smaller donors, working his way up to the major contributors. My stomach tightened as I realized what was coming.
And finally, Jonathan continued, I want to give special recognition to our largest investor, whose faith in our mission made everything else possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite the representative from VB Holdings to join me on stage. The spotlight found me in the crowd. 400 pairs of eyes turned in my direction, and at the head table, Isabella's face went completely white as she saw me clearly for the first time that evening. I rose slowly, my mind racing. This was not how I had wanted her to learn the truth, but there was no avoiding it now. The secret that had protected both of us for 3 years was about to explode in the most public way possible. As I walked towards the stage, I could see Isabella's expression changing, confusion giving way to understanding, understanding giving way to horror, horror giving way to rage. By the time I reached Jonathan's side, her green eyes were blazing with a fury I had never seen before. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan continued, oblivious to the family drama unfolding, please join me in thanking Vincent Blackwood, the man behind VB Holdings, whose investment and guidance have been instrumental in our success. The applause was warm and genuine, but I only had eyes for Isabella, who had risen from her seat at the head table, her face a mask of barely controlled emotion. Mr. Blackwood, Jonathan said, offering me the microphone, would you like to say a few words? This was the moment of truth. I could deflect, make some generic remarks about believing in Meridian's mission and try to minimize the revelation, or I could finally bridge the gap that had grown between Isabella and I, regardless of the consequences. I chose honesty. Thank you, Jonathan, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the now silent ballroom. It's true that VB Holdings has been proud to support Meridian Strategic Solutions, but I have to admit, my investment wasn't entirely based on market analysis or profit projections. I looked directly at Isabella, whose face had gone from pale to flushed. Sometimes, as investors, we have the privilege of supporting exceptional talent. And sometimes that talent happens to be someone we have watched grow and develop from the very beginning. The room was completely quiet now, sensing that something significant was happening. 3 years ago, I continued, I made an investment in this company not just because I believed in its mission, but because I believed in one particular individual whose intelligence, integrity, and dedication I had witnessed firsthand for 32 years. Isabella's mouth fell open as the full implications hit her. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, never taking my eyes off my daughter, I invested in Meridian Strategic Solutions because I am incredibly proud of Isabella Blackwood-Sterling. She is not just one of this city's most promising business leaders, she is my daughter. The gasps and murmurs that rippled through the crowd were nothing compared to the sound that escaped Isabella's lips, a strangled cry that contained 3 years' worth of fury, betrayal, and humiliation. She stood frozen for a moment, her entire worldview crashing down around her. The independent success she had built, the achievements she had earned through her own merit, the career she had forged without any help from her father, all of it was suddenly revealed to be built on a foundation she had never known existed. And then, in front of 400 of Portland's most influential business leaders, Isabella Blackwood-Sterling completely lost her composure. "You," she said, her voice shaking with rage, pointing at me from across the ballroom, "you pathetic, manipulative old man. You couldn't stand that I succeeded without you, so you had to insert yourself into my career. You had to control everything, didn't you?" The crowd was stunned into silence. Jonathan Winters stood beside me, his face a picture of confusion and growing alarm. "Isabella," I started, but she cut me off. "Don't you dare," she snarled, moving closer to the stage. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. How long have you been pulling strings behind my back? How long have you been making me into your puppet?" "That's not what happened," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the pain in my chest. Everything you've achieved, you earned. I simply you provided nothing but lies," she screamed, her professional composure completely shattered. "My entire career is a sham. Every client, every success, every promotion, it's all tainted by your manipulation." The room was now buzzing with whispered conversations and the subtle sound of smartphones recording what was clearly going to be tomorrow's biggest business scandal. 3 years, Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger and more venomous with each word. 3 years you let me believe I was building something real. 3 years you watched me work 18-hour days thinking I was proving my worth, when really I was just performing in your elaborate puppet show. She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's acoustics. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Vincent Blackwood, not just an investor, but apparently the puppet master who's been orchestrating my entire career, the man who was so threatened by his daughter's independence that he had to secretly control her success." The humiliation was complete and devastating. But as I watched my daughter destroy herself in front of Portland's business community, all I felt was sadness for both of us. "Isabella," I said quietly, but the microphone carried my words throughout the ballroom. "I never meant for it to happen this way." "How did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to reveal this on your deathbed, some final power play to prove that I never could have succeeded without Daddy's help?" "I want you to succeed," I said simply. "That's all I ever wanted. By lying to me for 3 years, by making every achievement meaningless?" "Your achievements aren't meaningless," I insisted. "The clients you saved, the jobs you protected, the strategies you developed, that was all you. I provided capital, nothing more." But Isabella was beyond reasoning. The revelation had struck at the core of her identity, undermining everything she believed about herself and her capabilities. "Nothing more," she laughed bitterly. "You provided the foundation for my entire career. Without your money, Meridian couldn't have hired me. Without your influence, I never would have gotten the opportunities that made me successful." "That's not true," Jonathan Winters interjected, finally finding his voice. "Isabella, your performance has been exceptional regardless of any investment considerations. Your value to this firm is compromised," Isabella finished. "How can I trust any evaluation of my work when my father owns 40% of the company?" The figure sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. 40% was substantial, enough to influence major decisions, enough to protect a favored employee from consequences, enough to call into question every promotion and recognition she had received. Isabella stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the wreckage of her professional reputation. Her keynote speech about independent achievement now seemed like a cruel joke. Her career, which she had built with such pride and determination, was suddenly revealed to be a construction project where her father had provided the blueprints, the foundation, and the building materials. But as I watched her standing there, magnificent in her fury and devastating in her pain, I realized that she was wrong about one crucial thing. "Isabella," I said, stepping away from the podium and moving to the edge of the stage so I could see her more clearly. "You want to know the truth? The whole truth?" "I think we've heard enough truth for one evening," she replied coldly. "The truth," I continued, ignoring her dismissal, "is that you're absolutely right. I did manipulate your career. I did pull strings and create opportunities. I did build the foundation that allowed you to succeed."
Her face twisted with vindication and pain. "But here's what you don't understand," I said, my voice growing stronger. "In 45 years of investing, I have never, not once, put my money behind someone I didn't believe could deliver extraordinary returns. I don't invest in nepotism, Isabella. I invest in exceptional talent." The room was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "Yes, I opened doors for you. Yes, I created opportunities. But I did it because you are the most brilliant strategist I have ever encountered. I did it because you have an intuitive understanding of business dynamics that can't be taught. I did it because in a room full of Harvard MBAs, you are consistently the smartest person present." Isabella's expression wavered slightly, confusion mixing with her anger. "You think I invested $15 million in Meridian Strategic Solutions because you're my daughter? I invested because Jonathan Winters showed me your work portfolio, and I knew that anyone capable of producing those strategies was worth betting on. The family connection didn't drive the investment, Isabella. Your exceptional abilities did." "That's convenient to say now," she replied, but some of the venom had left her voice. "Ask Jonathan," I said, turning to Meridian's managing partner. "Tell her about our first meeting. Tell her what convinced me to invest." Jonathan looked uncomfortable being dragged into the family conflict, but he answered honestly. "Vincent, your first question wasn't about Isabella. It was about our overall business model. You spent 2 hours reviewing our financial projections and client portfolios before you even asked about individual team members." "And what sealed the deal?" I pressed. "You saw Isabella's restructuring plan for Cascade Industries. You said it was the most innovative approach to corporate turnaround you'd seen in 20 years. Isabella stared at both of us, her certainty beginning to crack. "That plan saved Cascade Industries 800 jobs. It turned a failing company into a profitable one. That wasn't nepotism, Isabella. That was genius." For the first time since the revelation began, Isabella seemed to hesitate. The absolute conviction of her betrayal was giving way to something more complex. "But you still lied to me," she said, though her voice lacked its earlier fury. "You still manipulated the situation." "Yes," I admitted, "I did. And I was wrong to do it secretly. But I wasn't wrong about your abilities." The ballroom remained silent, 400 witnesses to a family reckoning that had spiraled far beyond anything anyone could have anticipated. Isabella looked around the room, finally seeming to realize that her emotional breakdown had been entirely public. Her professional composure began reasserting itself, though the damage was clearly done. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice steady but strained, "I apologize for subjecting you to this family drama. Obviously, I need some time to process this information and determine how it affects my position at Meridian Strategic Solutions." She turned to Jonathan Winters. "Jonathan, I'll submit my resignation first thing Monday morning. The integrity of the firm can't be compromised by questions about my qualifications or my family connections." "Isabella, that's not necessary," Jonathan protested. "Your value to this company is now permanently questionable," she interrupted, "and I won't allow my personal situation to damage Meridian's reputation." With that, she walked out of the ballroom with her head held high, leaving behind a room full of stunned witnesses and one heartbroken father who had just watched his attempt at reconciliation destroy his daughter's career. But as I stood there in the aftermath, watching the crowd slowly begin to disperse and whisper amongst themselves, I knew that this was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the real confrontation. Because Isabella Blackwood-Sterling was about to discover that her father's influence extended far beyond Meridian Strategic Solutions, and that her public humiliation of Vincent Blackwood would have consequences she could never have imagined. Tomorrow, Isabella would learn exactly what it meant to challenge Vincent Blackwood, and she would discover that some battles are won not through public confrontation, but through the quiet, systematic dismantling of everything her opponent holds dear.
3 weeks after the gala disaster, Isabella's world had completely collapsed. The video of her public breakdown had gone viral on LinkedIn and business blogs. "Entitled Executive Discovers Daddy's Money Built Her Career," read the headlines. Her resignation from Meridian had made the financial news, with speculation about nepotism and corporate corruption. But the real destruction began when Vincent made his move. Within days, Isabella discovered that VB Holdings wasn't just an investor in Meridian. Vincent controlled major stakes in 12 of Portland's top consulting firms. Every job interview she scheduled was mysteriously canceled. Headhunters stopped returning her calls. The corporate restructuring world, where she had once been a rising star, suddenly had no place for Isabella Blackwood-Sterling. Her savings dwindled as her consulting contracts evaporated. The luxury apartment overlooking the Columbia River became unaffordable. Her professional network, built over years of careful relationship management, turned cold as the scandal tainted her reputation. The final blow came when she learned that Vincent's influence extended to the East Coast. Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, doors that had once been open were now permanently closed. Desperate and broken, Isabella finally called her father. "Dad," she whispered into the phone, her voice barely audible. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said at the gala. I know I was wrong to humiliate you like that." Vincent listened to his daughter's tears, feeling no satisfaction in her downfall. "I've lost everything," she continued. "No one will hire me. My reputation is destroyed. I can't even get an interview for junior positions. Please, I'm begging you, make it stop." There was a long silence before Vincent spoke. "Isabella, do you understand why this happened?" "Because I embarrassed you publicly. Because I called you pathetic and accused you of manipulation." "No," Vincent said quietly. "This happened because you forgot something crucial about business and about family. Power isn't just about what you can build. It's about understanding the ecosystem you're operating in." "I understand now. I understand that you built the foundation for my success, and I should have been grateful instead of resentful. I understand that I was wrong to reject your help and wrong to attack you publicly." Vincent felt his heart breaking as he listened to his daughter's desperation. "There's one more thing you need to understand," he said. "The man who can destroy your career with a few phone calls is the same man who spent 32 years loving you unconditionally. The same man who is about to restore everything you've lost." "What do you mean?" "Check your email, Isabella. Winters & Associates just offered you a senior partner position. Full autonomy, your own division, complete creative control. It's everything you wanted at Meridian, but better." Isabella's breathing stopped. "But how is that possible?" "Because I bought controlling interest in Winters & Associates yesterday," he said simply. "And because, despite everything that's happened, you're still the most brilliant strategist in this city. Your public breakdown doesn't change your capabilities, Isabella. It just reminded you that even the most independent people need family." Through her tears, Isabella finally understood. Her father hadn't destroyed her career out of spite. He had systematically demonstrated his power, then used that same power to rebuild what she had lost. "Dad, Welcome back to the family business, Isabella. This time, let's try working together instead of pretending we're strangers." As Vincent hung up the phone, he smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't defeating your opponent. It's turning them into your greatest ally. Isabella had learned that challenging Vincent Blackwood came with consequences. But she had also learned that being Vincent Blackwood's daughter came with second chances. The war was over. The real partnership was just beginning.